They said the door was unlocked, it was. But even so, no one came out. One officer called over the radio. "You've run a shield before." "Yeah," came the calm reply, though the tension in the voice was palpable. "Okay, commit with the shield." "Commit." "Lethal," the officer responded. "Less lethal in your hands. Maybe get one more." Outside, the quiet of the suburban street was deceptive. The faint hum of air conditioning units, the distant bark of a dog, even the soft flicker of porch lights, all of it suggested a calm evening. The kind of night that lulled neighbors into thinking nothing extraordinary could happen. But inside the Smithfield drive home, chaos had erupted in the dead of night. This was no ordinary domestic dispute. This was a situation with life and death stakes. Every second counted, every command over the radio carried weight, and the officers knew that hesitation could be fatal. It was 1:25 p.m. when 48-year-old Richard Racia sent a text to his father, Daniel, who lived more than 30 minutes away. The message was shocking in its simplicity and clarity. "I just shot Allison." Daniel's hand froze over the phone. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the message with the day's events, the laughter of children, the smell of birthday cake, the harmless chaos of presents being torn open. He stared at the screen, disbelief written across his face. "This is a bad joke," he replied, hoping that somehow, somewhere, the world had played a cruel trick on him. But the response that came back offered no relief. It was cold, calculated matter of fact. "She was attacking me. I had to put her down." Daniel's stomach sank. He could feel the weight of the words pressing down, the sudden, horrifying clarity that this was not a misunderstanding, not a heated argument, not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a confession, a revelation that the world he thought he knew had been torn apart. "Call 911 now," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. Richard refused. Silence. Then, 30 minutes later, a message arrived that would forever etch itself into the memory of the family. A photo of Allison's lifeless body, sprawled on the floor, blood pooling around her, sent to both his father and his brother. The image was horrifying in its simplicity, stark in its finality, and impossible to unsee. When Daniel finally arrived at the home, the scene he encountered was chilling in its normalcy. The house looked intact, the lights dimmed, the birthday decorations still clinging to the walls, as if mocking the tragedy that had unfolded. Richard stood calmly outside the master bedroom, his demeanor unnervingly composed. There was no panic, no tears, no sense of urgency. Only the eerie stillness of someone detached from the gravity of the moment. "You want to see her?" Richard asked. His voice was casual, almost clinical, as he led his father into the room. There, on the bedroom floor, lay Allison Shehan, face down, motionless, surrounded by the evidence of violence, the pool of blood, the overturned furniture, the quiet chaos that spoke louder than any words could. Only then was 911 finally called. Over 2 hours had passed since the initial text. 2 hours during which a life had been extinguished, a family irreparably changed, and a child's world shattered. By the time law enforcement arrived, the scene was frozen in horror. Each moment stretched taut with the memory of what had occurred and the knowledge of what might have been prevented. Outside, the officers prepared for entry, shields raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness, every movement measured, every breath controlled. Inside, the house held the remnants of a normal life violently interrupted, a birthday party that had ended in terror, a home transformed into a crime scene. The quiet suburban street was no longer a haven. It was the setting for a nightmare that would echo through the family, the neighborhood, and the community for years to come. Even in the chilling stillness of that moment, the human element was impossible to ignore. A father, confronted with the unimaginable, forced to navigate grief and shock while ensuring the safety of his grandson. Officers, bracing for the unknown, moving carefully to protect lives while confronting death and violence. And in the center of it all, the child who had spent the day laughing, now left with the knowledge that his mother was gone, his innocence forever altered. The events of April 15, 2023 began as a quiet celebration and ended in irreversible tragedy. And in that silence, that locked and unlocked doorway, the fragile line between normalcy and chaos had been crossed, leaving only devastation in its wake. The Orange County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly to the call, their approach deliberate and methodical. This was not a routine domestic dispute. They were dealing with a potential homicide in progress. Officers didn't simply walk up to the front door and hope for the best. From the moment they arrived, they moved with precision, canvassing the property and locking down the perimeter. Each squad car and officer was positioned strategically, establishing a defensive perimeter around the Smithfield Drive residence to ensure no one could slip out unnoticed and to protect any potential victims inside. Dispatch had already flagged the situation as critical. The brief but chilling reports over the radio suggested that a suspect inside the home had already used a firearm. The officers responding had no idea if they were facing a barricaded suspect prepared for a standoff, someone ready to ambush them, or a person who might surrender peacefully. The stakes could not have been higher. Every second mattered and any misstep could be fatal. Their mission, however, remained focused and clear: detain the suspect with the minimal use of force necessary and ensure the safety of any survivors. From the relative safety of a patrol cruiser parked at the curb, an officer's voice cut through the quiet suburban night over the PA system. Residents of Smithfield Drive, this is the Orange County Sheriff's Office. One at a time, come out the front door with your hands up. The words hung in the air, repeated again and again as officers prepared for what could happen next. Seconds felt like minutes, and each moment of silence only heightened the tension. Officers could hear faint movements inside the house, doors opening and closing, a shuffle of footsteps, but no one emerged. Tactical teams moved in formation, shields raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness, clearing rooms methodically and keeping each other covered. "Hands if you got a shield," one officer shouted, his voice echoing off the quiet suburban streets. "Step out of the house! Step out!" Commands were repeated over and over, punctuated by moments of silence that made the tension almost unbearable. Finally, as officers progressed through the house, they entered the master bedroom. There, the grim reality of the situation became immediately apparent. Allison Shehan, 46 years old, lay on the floor suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She was Richard Racia's girlfriend of 8 years and the mother of their 6-year-old son. The scene was devastating. First responders rushed to her side and transported her to Ocala Regional Hospital in a desperate bid to save her life, but the injuries were too severe. Despite all efforts, the medical team had no choice but to halt life-saving interventions. Inside the bedroom, the officers encountered chaos and confusion. An unloaded .40 caliber firearm rested on a dresser as though abandoned in haste. 2 spent shell casings littered the floor nearby, evidence of the shooting that had just taken place. Shockingly, a single shell casing had even found its way into a fish tank, a detail that seemed almost surreal in the midst of the tragedy. Amid this scene of violence and disarray, deputies discovered the couple's 6-year-old son. Miraculously, he had not been physically harmed. He was taken into the care of authorities and family members, a small, fragile thread of safety in an otherwise devastating night. Richard Racia, the suspect, was apprehended on the scene without incident. His demeanor was unsettling, calm and almost nonchalant given the severity of the situation. There was no visible panic, no outward remorse. Officers handcuffed him and read him his rights, all while maintaining control over the household and ensuring that no additional threats emerged. The tactical operation, though fraught with tension and danger, had been executed efficiently, preventing further harm to anyone else in the home. The events of that night would leave lasting scars on everyone involved. The officers had managed to contain a volatile situation, securing the home, rescuing an innocent child, and taking the suspect into custody without additional bloodshed. Yet, the sight of Allison Shehan, a mother and partner whose life had been violently cut short, would haunt the memories of those first responders for years to come. In the end, the tactical precision of the Orange County Sheriff's Office had ensured that, at the very least, the tragedy did not extend further, but the devastating human cost was already immeasurable. Throughout his interactions with law enforcement, Richard Racia attempted to frame the shooting as an act of self-defense. He claimed that Allison Shehan had attacked him, stomping on his foot during a heated altercation, which, in his account, forced him to retrieve a firearm from a biometric safe located next to his bed. He insisted that he acted purely out of fear for his safety, presenting himself as a man defending himself against a physical assault by someone significantly smaller than him. However, as investigators meticulously examined the scene, the cracks in his story became increasingly apparent. The logistics of Racia's claim raised immediate red flags. According to his account, he had been in a physical struggle with Allison, while simultaneously managing to open a biometric safe with his fingerprint and extract a loaded firearm. Law enforcement experts quickly noted that this sequence of events would have been extraordinarily difficult under any circumstances, let alone during a tense and chaotic altercation. The physical realities of retrieving a weapon from a locked safe while being attacked made his version of events increasingly implausible. Richard went further, describing the situation in dramatic terms. He claimed that Allison had charged at him in a frenzy, attempting to claw his eyes out, and that he had no choice but to shoot in order to defend himself. He painted a picture of a desperate man cornered by a volatile partner, reacting instinctively to preserve his life. To anyone hearing the account, the narrative seemed designed to elicit sympathy and frame the shooting as an unavoidable tragedy rather than a premeditated act. Yet the forensic evidence and the autopsy contradicted every aspect of his story. Medical examiners determined that Allison had been shot 4 times in the back. None of the gunshot wounds aligned with a face-to-face struggle or a defensive shooting scenario. The trajectory of the bullets and the locations of the wounds indicated that Allison was moving away from him at the time she was shot. This was not a defensive confrontation in the classic sense, it was execution-style violence. Every piece of evidence, from the position of the body to the angles of the gunshot wounds, painted a clear and undeniable picture. Detectives analyzing the case concluded that there was no stand your ground or self-defense justification in this instance. The physical evidence directly contradicted Richard's repeated claims of being attacked. Where he had portrayed himself as a victim, the reality was starkly different. The evidence suggested deliberate, controlled, and lethal action. Even the circumstances of the room itself, the location of the gun, the spent casings, and the sequence of movement within the bedroom, indicated that Racia had the ability to leave the situation without resorting to violence, but instead chose to arm himself and shoot Allison. In the eyes of law enforcement and forensic experts, Richard's narrative was an attempt to retroactively justify his actions. His words and demeanor during interviews reflected a carefully constructed story meant to frame the tragedy as self-defense, but the objective reality was far more damning. Every forensic detail, every observation at the scene, and the autopsy findings converged to show that this was not a spontaneous act of protection. It was intentional, and the consequences were fatal. For Allison Shehan's family, the pain was immediate and visceral. Her brother, Dennis Castanis, struggled to reconcile the events with the woman he knew all his life. She was loving. She was a great mom, he said, his voice trembling as he fought to hold back tears. That's the saddest part. There's a little boy involved, and he's going to grow up without his mommy. Dennis' words cut to the heart of the tragedy. The ripple effects of violence extend far beyond the immediate victim. Allison's 6-year-old son, who had spent the day celebrating his birthday, was now left to navigate the loss of a mother he barely understood could be gone. What should have been a night filled with balloons, laughter, and cake became a nightmare of grief and confusion. The cruel timing of the events amplified the sense of horror. The morning had begun like any other birthday, filled with small joys and family traditions. Friends and relatives had gathered to celebrate, bringing gifts and laughter to a home on Smithfield Drive. A birthday party for a 6-year-old is supposed to be one of the most innocent, joyful events in a child's life. Yet in the span of a few hours, that innocence was irrevocably shattered. By the evening, the atmosphere had transformed from celebration to terror, with sirens and police vehicles replacing the sounds of play and joy. By the time law enforcement arrived and assessed the scene, the reality was grim. A mother was dead, a child was traumatized, and a family's life had been forever altered. The legal process that followed did little to ease the emotional turmoil. First-degree murder charges carried severe penalties, and the denial of bond ensured that Richard would not have the freedom to leave the confines of the jail while awaiting trial. For the family, every hour that passed was filled with the tension of not knowing how the judicial system would respond, and whether justice could ever truly compensate for the loss of Allison. Dennis Castanis described the difficulty of reconciling Allison's warm, loving personality with the brutality of the act that ended her life. She had been more than a sister or a partner. She had been a mother who devoted herself to her child, a family member whose presence shaped the lives of those around her. Losing her in such a violent, sudden manner was almost impossible to comprehend. For Allison's young son, the consequences were immediate and devastating. A 6-year-old's understanding of the world is fragile, and the abrupt loss of a parent can have lifelong implications. What began as a day of celebration became a moment of trauma that would follow him for the rest of his life. Birthdays, holidays, and everyday routines would forever carry the weight of that night, a stark reminder of the fragility of safety and the unpredictability of human behavior. The transition from joy to tragedy in a matter of hours underscores the stark reality that life can change in an instant, leaving behind a void that nothing can truly fill. Amid the shock and grief, there was also a sense of helplessness. Family members were forced to navigate the complexities of the legal system, all while coping with the emotional devastation of losing someone they loved. The courtroom proceedings, the investigations, and the ongoing media attention served as constant reminders of the night's violence, making it difficult to find closure or peace. For Dennis Castanis and other relatives, the loss was deeply personal, intertwined with daily reminders of Allison's absence and the life that was taken from her and her son. The case would move through the legal system, with charges, trials, and sentences, but for the family, the human cost, the absence, the heartbreak, and the empty spaces left behind would remain immeasurable. It was a night that transformed a simple birthday celebration into a lasting tragedy, one that would leave a mark not just on the immediate family, but on all who knew Allison Shehan and the son she loved so deeply. Even as the courtroom proceedings unfolded and Richard Racia faced the consequences of his actions, The reverberations of that night continued to echo far beyond legal documents or prison sentences. Allison Shehan's 6-year-old son would forever carry the imprint of that evening, a trauma that no therapy, no support, and no justice could fully erase. A child's mind interprets the world through relationships and routine, and the abrupt removal of a parent through violence shatters the very foundation of security and trust. For him, bedtime stories, shared meals, birthday candles, and the quiet comfort of a mother's presence became memories tinged with confusion and loss. Each familiar corner of his home, every ordinary object, from toys left scattered on the floor to his mother's clothing hanging in the closet, would serve as a reminder of absence, a silent testimony to what had been taken from him in a single, incomprehensible act. Trauma at such a formative age has lasting effects. Experts note that children exposed to violent death within the family may develop heightened anxiety, depression, attachment issues, and difficulty forming trusting relationships. Every day, this young boy would navigate the world carrying the knowledge that the person who was supposed to protect and nurture him, the mother he depended on, had been taken not by fate or accident, but by the hands of someone close to the family. The betrayal inherent in such violence adds layers of complexity to grief, deepening the sense of vulnerability and fear. While loved ones would step in to care for him, no amount of guidance or affection could entirely replace the mother whose love shaped his early years. Allison's family, too, would live with the weight of unanswerable questions. Dennis Castanis, her brother, described the helplessness that comes from watching the ripples of tragedy unfold. "You can't bring her back," he said, "and you can't shield him from knowing what happened." Family members were left to navigate the delicate balance between protecting the child and helping him process the reality of his loss. Every conversation, every moment of comfort, was underscored by the knowledge that this boy would remember far more than anyone could prepare him for. Even the simplest of gestures, holding him close, reminding him of his mother's love, carried the burden of making up for the irreplaceable. The case also sparked reflection on broader societal issues. Domestic violence, mental instability, and unchecked escalation of conflict often go unnoticed until tragedy strikes. What began as a seemingly ordinary day, a birthday party in a quiet suburban neighborhood, ended in irreversible violence, exposing vulnerabilities that exist behind closed doors everywhere. Allison's death was a stark reminder that the warning signs are often subtle, invisible to those outside the household, and tragically ignored or underestimated until it is too late. It illustrates how quickly ordinary life can become extraordinary in its danger, and how ordinary individuals, parents, children, neighbors, can be thrust into situations that demand unimaginable courage or result in unimaginable loss. Moreover, this tragedy leaves a lasting imprint on the wider community. It serves as both a cautionary tale and a call to vigilance, an insistence that neighbors, friends, and extended family recognize the signs of domestic unrest before they escalate. It highlights the importance of accessible mental health support, early intervention in domestic disputes, and community awareness to prevent similar tragedies from unfolding. In this sense, Allison's death, while devastating, carries a legacy. It underscores the necessity of intervention, empathy, and proactive protection for those who are vulnerable. In the end, Allison Shehan's story is not defined solely by violence, but by the love she gave, the life she nurtured, and the resilience she inspires. Her son, though robbed of her physical presence, carries forward her legacy with each day he grows, supported by a network of family and friends determined to honor her memory. The tragedy transforms from a singular act of violence into a broader narrative of endurance, love, and the human capacity to persist even in the shadow of incomprehensible loss. Allison's life, though cruelly cut short, continues to resonate through her son, her family, and her community. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of memory, the necessity of vigilance in the face of domestic strife, and the ability of human resilience to carry forward the light of a life extinguished too soon. Even amidst darkness, her love persists, a constant presence shaping the boy she adored, the family who surrounds him, and the community that remembers her as a devoted mother, sister, and friend. Less than a month after his arrest, the legal landscape shifted dramatically. The initial first-degree murder charge against Richard Racia was reduced to second-degree murder, a decision that left Allison Shehan's family stunned and frustrated. For them, the evidence was clear, and the reduction felt like a miscarriage of justice. Dennis Castanis, Allison's brother, expressed the disbelief and anger that so many family members felt. "Shoots my sister in the back twice. I don't know how you can't charge first-degree murder based on that," he said, his voice heavy with both grief and indignation. The legal reasoning behind the reduction mattered little to those who had lost a loved one in such a brutal and irrevocable way. To them, it was not just about a charge or a conviction. It was about the truth of what had happened and the absence of the person they loved. On December 20th, 2024, the case reached a pivotal moment. Richard Racia pled guilty to second-degree murder with a firearm. The plea came after months of legal maneuvering, investigation, and family anguish. He was sentenced to a minimum mandatory term of 25 years in prison, a significant sentence by any measure. It represented the justice system's acknowledgement of the gravity of the crime, yet for Allison's family, it also underscored a painful reality. No sentence could restore the life that had been taken. The sentence, while substantial, offered Richard a defined finish line, a day when he could eventually step beyond prison walls and reclaim a life that Allison would never get the chance to live. That stark contrast, the certainty of a future for the perpetrator against the permanence of loss for the victim, added another layer to the family's grief. For Allison's 6-year-old son, the impact of that night and its aftermath is immeasurable. In a matter of hours, he went from the joy of birthday celebrations to the unimaginable void left by the loss of his mother. He will grow up with the silence and absence of a parent who had once been the center of his world, a father who treated his mother as disposable. Every birthday, every holiday, and every moment that might have been shared with his mother will instead be a reminder of that night, a night that stole the warmth and safety of childhood in one irrevocable act. Unlike his father, the child has no defined finish line. He cannot wait for justice or a court decision to make sense of his loss. The emotional and psychological consequences are lifelong, shaping his understanding of love, loss, and trust. Yet even in the face of such devastating tragedy, there are glimpses of resilience and hope. Allison's legacy does not exist solely in the pain of her passing or the shadow of her death. It lives on in the community she touched, the family who rallies around her son, and the memories of a mother who, despite her tragic end, gave everything to her child. Friends, relatives, and neighbors have taken on roles to provide stability, love, and guidance to a child whose life was forever altered by violence. They carry forward the lessons Allison taught, the warmth she radiated, and the nurturing care she provided. Her influence, though abruptly ended in life, continues in the lives she shaped and the hearts she left behind. The community's response has been a testament to the human capacity for compassion and solidarity in the wake of tragedy. Fundraisers, support networks, and neighborhood vigilance have emerged, not just as gestures of charity, but as mechanisms of love and continuity. In protecting and supporting Allison's son, the people around him are ensuring that the values she embodied, care, attention, and unconditional love, remain present in his upbringing. Her presence is felt not in body, but in the structure, guidance, and emotional support built around him. In many ways, Allison's son grows up surrounded by the echo of her love, even if she cannot physically be there. The legal outcome, while significant, cannot erase the human cost of Richard Racia's actions. The 25-year sentence is finite. It provides a clear endpoint for the man who committed the crime. For Allison, there is no return, no closure that can truly restore her life. For her child, there is only the path forward, one marked by both resilience and the memory of a mother's love that was tragically cut short. It is a reminder of the enduring consequences of violence, how a single act can ripple outward, leaving permanent imprints on the lives of those left behind. In reflecting on Allison's life and the tragedy that ended it, the focus is not solely on the crime or the punishment. It is on the life that was lived, the love that was given, and the indelible mark left on everyone who knew her. Despite the darkness of that night, Allison's legacy persists in the child who carries her memory, in the family that protects and nurtures him, and in a community that refuses to let her death be the final chapter. The story, though marred by violence and heartbreak, ultimately becomes one of enduring love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds between a mother, her child, and those who continue to honor her life. Allison Shehan's story, while tragic, is not forgotten. Her life, her love, and her devotion continue to shape the world she left behind, a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable loss, human resilience and the power of memory can endure, carrying forward the spirit of those taken too soon. The story of Allison Shehan is heartbreaking, but it is also a reminder even in the face of unimaginable loss, the human spirit endures. Her memory lives on in the boy she loved, in the family she cherished, and in the community that remembers her as a devoted mother and a remarkable person. Her story began as a birthday celebration and ended as a cautionary tale of domestic violence, mental instability, and tragic decisions, but it also serves as a call to protect the vulnerable, honor those lost, and cherish every moment with the people we love.